Hey guys, so if we're looking at my twine knife here, and I want to look at how I've got this thing set up and clearanced to actually cut the twine appropriately, let's just assume at this point everything else is set up and we're clear to this point. Our twine's in the right position, our twine needles are at the right clearances, our twine fingers are set up correctly. So if we've stepped through this entire process, now we're at the point where we want to set up our twine knives. You see our twine knife here. So first of all, overall look at our knotter assembly. This one's bolted down in the field operating position. I've got this one. This bolt is removed. That spring is removed so that I can take out the twine finger actuating rod. So you can see I've got that right over there. Twine finger actuating rod is unhooked, springs unhooked, and of course I have unbolted it from the frame. I've flipped it up out of the way, and now I want to set up my knives. So right now I don't have any tension on this knotter spring, and you don't need it. You can do it with or without the tension. Typically I do it with the tension, but I've got some other issues I'm working through on this. So let's take a look at setting up this knife relative to this here twine disc. If I look at my manual here under the twine knife, it says that my clearances should be between 1/16 and 1/8 between the knife and the twine disc. Okay, and then that's on the cutting stroke. On the return stroke, it has to clear the entire twine disc assembly. Now, if adjustments needed, we do that through these two cap screws. And here's an interesting part, right? I have tried to set these up multiple times. I've worked through setting these up multiple times, and I really have never been able to affect the distance from the twine disc. It always seems to come out right about in the same spot, and it's kind of interesting. I think it's because of the design of this. And I could be totally wrong here, and we'll stop through this and then I'll edit the video, whatever. But you can see that my twine knife here, that's just a bent piece of steel, right? And I'm sure it's a higher carbon steel, but it's bent down with a sharpened edge right there, or an edge that you want to keep sharp. So what seems to happen is whenever I adjust the position of this and try to pull it down and away from the twine discs, and I clamp it down, it starts to impinge on this curve here, and this curve is then going to pull it back down. So you can't really adjust these things by sliding the knives in this axis, and I don't think you're supposed to. These knives are slotted to adjust in this axis right here. Well, they're supposed to be slotted. I'm going to open this knife up or take it off, and we'll take a look at it. Just pop these two cap screws out. Now you can see on this thing, let's see, come on, autofocus. I don't know if autofocus is going to like this. These are supposed to just be slotted right there and right there, and you can see that they're actually hogged out pretty good. So rather than a good clean slot, I've got an egg shape there. So you can see how it's egg shaped there, that's pulling it up. So if I'm assuming that my cap screw is most likely riding where those egg shapes have worked their way through on this knife, say right there, and right there, then that's actually pulling the knife up and closer to the twine discs. So as far as the adjustments go, it's supposed to primarily be just laterally here, not up and down. That's wear. That's not a factory, and you can verify that. You can go look at new examples of these, and they're just slotted. Okay, so if I put my cap screws back in and go to adjust this thing, well, we'll just pretend I have them in right now. If I'm just sliding this thing laterally, I make no difference to the position away from the knife. Excuse me, away from the twine discs. And so what I end up getting is the phenomenon I like to say is that I get what I get and I don't throw a fit. So when I go to set these knives up, all I do is I put my knives back on, and we'll have to edit this part out because this is because I'm challenged with getting cap screws started. Right? That's not something that that's not one of my high skills, right? You know. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and just bias this as hard up against these screws as I can, and just barely finger tight these down. If I do that, I have probably that 1/16 of a clearance that they're asking for. There we go. Maybe that 1/16, right? You can see, you should be able to see light through there. But just as soon as I snug that down, I can feel it. You might be able to hear that. I can feel that rubbing, and I've lost that clearance. I'm not saying that's the way that all of these are. I'm saying that's the way that my specific baler, that's the way mine is. So whenever I set these up, all I do is I try to set up my knives so it just skims across and makes absolutely minimal contact with my twine discs. Ideally, I'll have no contact at all. It's just going to slide right on past there with that 1/16 to 1/8 clearance, which just happens to be, well, this should be 3/32. This is machinist rule. So a 3/32 machinist rule is right in between a 1/16 and an 1/8. So a machinist rule worth of clearance on your knives, that's perfect. That's ideal. I end up getting a little bit closer than that, and that's the way that this baler happens to run. I haven't been able to have any success changing that. To change that, I think I would have to change the actual bend in my knife, and I'm just not going to mess with that, right? It works the way it is. It cuts reasonably well. Most of my issues, I believe, are in other parts of this assembly. So I'm going to set this back up. I'm going to just set this up to clear just the best that I can. So I've got it set up. It just barely kisses on the block. If I put any tension at all on it, it clears. That's just the way that it's going to have to run. It's the way that it does run on my baler. Now when I sharpen these, all I ever do, I take them off to sharpen them. I use the file, the diamond file on my Leatherman. You can use a stone if you want to, if you have one. I just don't happen to have a stone to use on there. I use my Leatherman file, and I've had good results with that. Like I've said, I don't think that my problems with this baler are on the twine knives and the cutting. Every once in a while, they'll get dull. I have to sharpen them up, and they'll run for a couple of years with the mountain, several thousand bales with a lot of downtime in between. So that's what I do to set these up. I use my machinist rule. I try to get that clearance in there as tight as I can, recognizing that on my specific baler, it's going to make contact, and I have to live with that.